Well, hello again. Here's another quick one for the Daily Dose with PD Howler. Last session we took a look at some of the text tools in conjunction with the selection masks and how to work with stored images and stored selections in particular. And in fact, this is another example, just to wrap it up, where one thing you can barely see here, but it makes a big difference in readability, is if you can add a border around the text which shows a gradient that's the inverse of the one that you use on the inside. So this is a trick that you can use to make sure that the text can be read regardless of what the background image is. If you have a white background, the bright parts of the text might be difficult to read unless you have a dark border around it. And likewise, if you have a dark background, the dark parts of the text might be difficult to read unless you have a light background around it, a light border. So that's a technique that you can use to easily create a alternate gradient that you will fill on the outside border, and then have the normal gradient on the inside, and that way everything remains quite easily read. A couple of other things I want to show you before we move on to the next section. On the website, if you go to the overview, and then over here on the left side, keep in mind there's a thing called What's Possible, and there's a whole category here on titles and text. There it is, lower right, text, titles and logos, and hopefully that will give you some ideas of other types of uses for the text tool in conjunction quite often with the selection tool. You see here, for instance, in the alpha channel, loading that into a brush, and then you can of course do a lot of things with it once it's in the brush. Remember, Dog Waffle is really all about brushes. I mean, it's got some layering and some selection tools and so on, but quite often you get the big power of Dog Waffle if you connect with that image-based brush, the custom brush. And then of course a variety of filters, and never enough filters. Always more stuff to do there. Alright, so let's move on to the next session. Today's topic is going to be on paths and something similar. I forget what it was. Let's go and close this. There's really two areas of interest in this. When you draw, you may see this new tool here. This is the curve tool right there. Okay, and the curve tool allows you to set a couple of points like this and this and this on, and draw a curve going through it. So it's almost like dealing with vectors, with vector graphics. And then when you're done, let's say maybe you want to close this, you can do that here, I think. Make this a closed curve. There you go. And then you can use the tools to fine-tune and edit your curve, right? And let's say we want that to actually go into the alpha channel. So there's a couple of things you can do with it. You can brush, you can draw whatever the current brush is, you can stroke that along that path. That's a really nasty brush right now here, so let's go and undo that and instead use our good old large airbrush, and you'll see it go along there. Or you might do that and then also fill it. There's a fill tool here with the current fill settings, and I still have my gradient that I used in the prior image. So you see a couple of ways to basically create alternate ways to create a glowing halo around the selection. But another one you can also use here is fill it into the alpha channel. Okay, so now, or draw this into the alpha channel. So we now have a selection, and we can go fill with the fill tool into that area. Or you can use all these traditional tools that the special effects that work with the alpha, like a glow effect along that. That one's using the primary color we see here, the reddish on the inside. If you want that glow on the outside, what you might want to do is perhaps erase everything to black. Let's go right click here, erase everything to black, and then invert the selection. Invert the alpha and add perhaps a light bluish greenish tint, and make that the glow effect around it. Alpha glow, you get to say how strong you want it, and there's your glow effect. It also glows on the edges, so you may need to crop that later on or pick it up. Let's see what other ways to work with this this selection tool, or rather this curve. You can draw a image along it. You can basically have a little animation going along it. You can fill it. You can also render it in such a way that it I don't know if you can tell that. Oh yeah, it's basically drawing. Let me swap these two here, or actually let's go white. It's going to draw the brush after we clear the alpha there. It's going to draw the brush from the start and get from a very thin brush to a fat one in the middle, and then come back to a thin one. So it's kind of simulating the brush stroke you might get, or the look you might get with a tablet, even if I'm using actually a mouse here. So pretty interesting to see this kind of display here. That's actually something that you can also use on the fly. So rather than drawing a new sequence like this and painstakingly, or let's say we clear all this, instead of drawing a new one here, right, and then do your magic and then start a new one here, or maybe you don't want it closed, that's a toggle, something like this. Okay, what you could do is simply have it draw that on the fly, and there is an option here, the automatic modes. Okay, so you can have it automatically stroke it or draw it, which will do that. And I forget exactly how we do that at the end. Probably when we're done. Anyway, there's a lot to explore here, and I would encourage you to play with this. There is a great amount of artwork that can be created with that. Let's see, this one here. I think this one here might be it. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so you can, let's say you do something like this here. You do a stroke like this. The moment you let go, it draws it, right? So you see all sorts of possibilities here. Okay, and then when you go back to other tools, you get rid of that the path. So that's one place where we deal with paths, where you can interact through the path with the actual brush stroke, or with what's going to be filled, or what's going to go into the alpha channel, and so on. Very powerful tool. The other one relates more to animations, and what I'll do is I'll actually take this image here, and let's move that a little bit to the center with the shift tool. There you go. We got a little clip at the bottom here, but that's okay. And what I'll do now is make an animation from that. Okay, so I'll create an animation. Let's say, let's make it short, about 18 frames. And that animation, I want to draw something across it, and then I want to change what it actually looks like, the thing that I draw over it. So that's going to be done through the brush stroke. There is a tool here, the stroke player. Okay, so let's first draw something, maybe with just a regular brush, and we'll take an airbrush initially, right, and maybe some color pink, and we'll go something like this. Okay, and then so I said, well, I love this brush stroke, that's exactly what I had in mind, but I don't like the color, or I don't like how fat this line is, or I don't like the type of the brush, I want something else, maybe in addition, or on top, or instead of this. So what you can do, you go to undo, and it still remembers this most recent brush stroke that I just did. And so you can go here in the stroke player. Again, this is under animation, even though you can use this even outside of animations. You don't have to use this necessarily on animations, but you can use it on the current frame or on all frames of an animation. And that's why we have also a range where you can select the range of frames from 0 to 17, because we have a total of 18 frames in this case. But let's say we want to do this on the current frame, and I want to, instead of pink, I want it green. So I select the green color, and perhaps I want it smaller also, so I change the size. Okay, and I go and select current frame in the stroke player and replay it. So now it's going through that brush stroke that it still remembers. As long as I didn't click in here or draw something new, it still remembers this most recent brush stroke. And there we go. So let's say now I want to do a fat one that's wide. I'm gonna go a really big one like this, and somewhat more opaque and somewhat more transparent, kind of a glow effect, right? Replay that. And then, oh, that actually was opaque enough that it covered the green. So I'm gonna go back to the green and make it a little bit smaller now. And this one will be at full opacity. Replay that. So you see how that stroke can be used to create even more sophisticated paintings. From just a single brush stroke, you can create a lot of different things with it, because you basically have no limits here as to what you do with the brush. Again, it's very brush centric. You can grab this brush here with the balloon and perhaps make it a little bit smaller on the size, allow the custom brush transform. This is a custom brush, so you want to make sure that it allows it to actually change the size. Maybe do some randomness on the size, maybe change the size even more, and then again with the stroke player replay it, and you see a bunch of beach balls going along that same path. Paths are very powerful then, and you may want to save them, so there is a option here to save that path. Save that to a file, and then the other thing you can do is later on load it back in. And you can also play this path against an animation. So this beach ball, if we wanted that to go along that path, but not just on the single one frame, but across the entire animation, maybe without the jiggly, without the random positioning. So I'm gonna go make sure we don't have random position here, and let's see, random size, let's keep it without random size, random angle, random hue. Oh yeah, the color changes. No, let's go without it. Okay, let's just keep it kind of consistent, so the brush or the ball will be recognized as the same object all along its path. And so I'm going to now undo this, click undo, 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 and all I want to do is really draw that beach ball going from the upper left to the lower right on this path I drew, but going across each frame of the animation. Now right now the frames all look identical, right? So maybe I want to change that first. Maybe I want to do a little bit of a zoom or something like that. So let's go to the animation and the timeline. And there I'm going to do a little transform. Let's go look for transform filters. There you go. And we can easily say at the beginning of the animation we are at that size. At the end we will be at the same size again. But somewhere in between we'll be zooming in a tiny little bit. There you go. Okay, and maybe even rotate a little bit. Nah, that looks nasty because we got the black borders. Although we could take a look at how to fix that later on. Let's do that. Alright, so here we'll go and keyframe that and render that. So we now have a sequence of animations that are slightly different from each other, each frame. And we see this animation right now here. It's perfectly doing a ping pong because we made sure the last transform was the same as the first transform. So it doesn't look like a jump or something like that. And we still have the brush stroke that we drew there. So now this time, instead of drawing the brush stroke along like this, right, which is across the entire frame sequence in the single frame, we can say let's draw it against all frames, or a range of frames if you don't want it on all of them. There's also a Hancock mode, which is pretty impressive because it basically grows to a longer and longer path. This is something you might want to use for treasure maps when you want to show where the footprints go along a path and you want to see where they've been in the past so far. Alright, so let's go to all frames and replay the path along that. And now we have an animation in which this ball is going across. And let's say we want to have that ball actually bigger. So since it's a custom brush, we can store it right there under Store and Manage. And perhaps make it bigger, like twice as big. And maybe we don't like the orange look, let's change it to a different color. There's the hue, let's make it green, red, blue is good, let's go with that. And again, here's the all frames and replay it. Alright, so that gives you some ideas of how you can work with the path that comes from your brushstroke, and you can basically create all sorts of very funky animations with that quite easily. Alright, I hope that will be enough for today. A quick introduction to paths, and hope to see you soon on another Daily Dose with PD Howler.